Hey everybody, in this episode we're going to talk about freedom of speech. This is episode 4 in our Freedom series, USA versus Vietnam. You know, technology's changed a lot, and I'm going to do some episodes on some of the way that technology has affected freedom of speech. I just don't think we can cover it all in this one segment. So we'll put some stuff off and do it later. Freedom of speech is a right that's important to everybody. And today we're going to compare the differences in the way things work in the USA and the way they work in Vietnam. U.S. and Vietnam rights of freedom of speech are pretty similar, and that may surprise a lot of people. But the verbiage in their constitution in 1946 and the subsequent constitutions ratified later are very similar to our 1791 Constitution. The Bill of Rights considered freedom of speech so important that it placed it at number 1. The main freedoms covered in the First Amendment are the freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and also the right to peaceably assemble and petition the government for grievances. The Vietnamese Constitution has guarantees that are nearly identical to those in the U.S. Constitution. The original Constitution of Vietnam was in 1946, and there's been 2 major rewrites since. In those rewrites, these guarantees were still in place. They haven't changed. Also, they have a freedom of information. It's like our Freedom of Information Act. People are entitled to see what the government's doing. Guarantees privacy in your home, privacy amongst your family. So there's a lot of things in the Vietnamese Constitution that may be a little bit more concise than what's in the U.S. Constitution. The constitutional rights that guaranteed us in the First Amendment in the USA have been expanded. People that are visiting the country, people that are residents, non-citizen residents, they're all covered by the First Amendment. So it's expanded to include non-citizens. There's a whole new issue that's affecting freedom of speech in both of the countries. That's technology. The freedom of the press and internet freedom is nearly the same in Vietnam and the USA. Vietnam doesn't censor its internet much, except for a few little things. The porn sites and things are censored. Some articles about guns are censored. But overall, everything that you have in the U.S. you basically have in Vietnam. You got Facebook, Google, Twitter, and all that stuff. Mostly in Vietnam, there's very little censorship on the internet. Vietnamese news sites are also free to operate in the same space. So all things being equal, there's not much difference in internet freedom in the USA, the Western world, and Vietnam. We also have VPN services readily available here if you want to use a VPN, if you feel like you're being censored too much. Now let's talk a little bit about the reality of freedom of speech. In Vietnam, there have been things like journalists being detained or novelists and people that write articles, writers being detained for articles that they've written. But hey, that goes on in the USA too. The Obama administration was absolutely notorious about violating or limiting the rights of freedom of speech in the USA. There's a lot of articles online about that. So to think that the USA is just wide open for freedom of speech is not true. There's rules about what you can say on college campuses. There's all kinds of things. So in that respect, the government in the U.S. is not innocent of suppressing free speech. In general in Vietnam, it's not a good thing to be criticizing the government online. They're the only government here, and they really don't allow criticism that encourages overthrowing the government or changing the type of government that they have here. And the U.S. has a right to not be persecuted by the government has been taken over by the news media and the internet. If you look under the carpet in the U.S., you're going to find out that freedom of speech in the U.S. is under attack. You can look at the facts online and decide for yourself. about these activities. But with Twitter censoring people, Facebook censoring people, Google censoring people and changing their search results, things like that, that's censorship. Also, there's social censorship. If Black Lives Matter decides that they don't like you, well, they'll dox you, protest at your house, things like that. That's a form of censorship too. That's social censorship. So in the U.S., you've got some government censorship, you've got a lot of political censorship, and you've got a lot of social censorship. Also, the news media itself is guilty of censorship, mainly by omission, by not covering articles that are important to the people. I'll give you an example. When President Trump received Nobel Prize nominations for his work in the Mideast, nobody covered it. I think only Fox News is the only one that mentioned it, but very, very few of the news media mentioned it at all. The newspapers didn't cover it. Something as important as that should have been covered and just wasn't. So that's censorship. Basically, the way the internet tech companies are working in the U.S. is they give you a soapbox to stand on and say whatever you want, and while you're standing on it, they'll pull the box out from under you. People are being attacked for supporting one political candidate or the other. They are attacked for not using politically correct words, phrases. Even the meanings of words have been changed by radical political movements to fit their narratives. The so-called cancel culture has emerged. It's a way to infringe on free speech by threatening your safety, your job, your family, and ultimately your future. This activity is even more insidious because your speech and freedoms are being attacked by a variety of interests, not the government. And the sources and severity of the impact on your life is even more unpredictable. In everyday life in Vietnam, people speak openly about everything. Although the people I associate with, most of them don't talk much about the government. You'll find people generally like the government here, even though they think it's a little bureaucratic, a lot of paperwork, forms and things. They're generally pretty happy about the services they get. There are protests here. People protest quite often, and those things are usually settled peaceably. In everyday life in Vietnam, people speak pretty openly about the government, things they're happy with and things they're unhappy with. The Vietnam government has an extremely high approval rate. I read an article not long ago that said that the approval rate by the people in Vietnam was over 80%. When you talk to people here, they very seldom mention politics. They mostly talk about their job, their family, talk about food, beer, things like that, the important stuff in life. In every society, under every government system, there's going to be abuses of power and of regulation. But what is new is the type of pressure that's occurring in the USA because of social media, the internet, and big tech. It's definitely affecting freedom of speech. So even though we have the same guarantees in our constitutions that Vietnam has, both countries are being affected differently. But I'm going to let you be the judge. I'm just going to tell you about it. Hey, this is JR, the expat in Saigon. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is number 4 in our series. If you did enjoy it, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell so you won't miss one of these episodes. We've got a lot more coming. Thank you all for watching.